This story has been a part of my family for as long as I can remember, but it wasn't until recently that I realized how big of an impact it had. I'm here to share how my grandpa's invention, something you've probably never heard of, literally saved millions of lives. Buckle up because this gets wild. Growing up, I always thought my grandpa was just some quiet, tinkering kind of guy. You know, the type who's always in the garage, fixing up old radios or fiddling with his car. I never thought much of it until one day when I was about 14 and I stumbled on this box full of old, dusty papers. I pulled out a bunch of diagrams, sketches of something weird that looked like a little valve or some kind of small contraption. Curious, I asked my grandpa what it was. He looked at me for a moment, almost as if debating whether to tell me or not, and then he said, "That little thing? That's the heart valve, the one I designed." At the time, I had no clue what he was talking about, but little did I know I was holding a piece of history in my hands. You see, my grandpa invented a crucial component of the artificial heart valve, a small, seemingly insignificant device that has saved more people than you can imagine. Here's how it all started. Back in the 1960s, heart disease was the leading cause of death, and once your heart valve started to fail, it was pretty much a death sentence. My grandpa wasn't a surgeon or a cardiologist. Nope, he was a mechanical engineer working for this tiny medical device company. One day, his boss comes up to him and says something along the lines of, "We've got a problem. People are dying, and we need to figure out a way to replace these failing heart valves. Think you can come up with something?" Now, my grandpa, being the humble guy he was, didn't think much of it at the time, but he got to work, sketching out prototypes, experimenting with materials, and working day and night on something that could mimic the human heart valve without breaking down inside someone's body. He went through dozens of failed prototypes, but eventually, he designed this little contraption called a ball-in-cage valve. The basic idea was simple. When your heart pumps, the ball moves up and down inside a metal cage, opening and closing just like a natural valve would. It was genius in its simplicity, but the problem was getting anyone to believe in it. When my grandpa first pitched the design to doctors, they were skeptical. A ball in a cage? That's not going to work inside someone's heart, they'd say. But grandpa didn't give up. He worked with a small team of surgeons who were willing to give it a shot, and after some fine-tuning, they implanted it into a patient who was on death's doorstep. And guess what? It worked. The patient not only survived the surgery, but went on to live another 15 years with that little ball-in-cage device ticking away inside their chest. Word started spreading, and soon, doctors all over the world were calling for these heart valves. Here's the kicker though. Despite all of this, nobody knows my grandpa's name. You've probably never heard of him, and you won't find him in the history books. Why? Because the company he worked for ended up patenting the design, and my grandpa never got any credit. They mass-produced the valve, made millions off it, and the world moved on. Grandpa didn't care much about the fame or the money. He always said, "As long as it helps people, that's enough for me." And it did. According to some estimates, the ball-in-cage heart valve has saved millions of lives. Even today, modern versions of his design are still being used in medical devices across the world. But here's the thing, my grandpa's story isn't unique. There are tons of unsung heroes like him out there, people whose inventions changed the course of history, but they never got the recognition they deserved. I think about that a lot these days. My grandpa passed away a few years ago, and while he was never famous, he left behind this incredible legacy. And the craziest part? If I hadn't asked him about those dusty old papers that day, I might have never known. So, yeah, next time you hear about a groundbreaking invention or some life-saving device, remember that behind every one of those things, there's probably someone like my grandpa, working quietly in the background, just trying to make the world a little better.